Hello everyone, I hope that this is the last video lecture and that I need to record as well as you need to watch, and I do hope that you learn from this video lecture and please complete the task as required in this video. So I will inform you the submission date and how to submit it later on. So today our topic is still regarding the long-term memory, which is more on the how it encodes the informations, how the informations being retrieved from the long-term memory to working memory, and the last part of this lecture is about consolidations. It consists of three parts for this lecture. So the first one is encoding and then retrieval. The last one will be consolidations. So by the end of this lesson, you will be able to first define encoding, retrieval, and consolidation. And then you are able to explain few mechanism of encoding, which means how people can actually encode a new information, and then discuss the technique of effective studying. So I hope that it can relate more to your own personal experience, and then identify ways that getting information out of memory, which is how we retrieve the memory from long term to working memory. Lastly, you will be able to distinguish what is synaptic consolidation and system consolidations. So do your own self-test after you watch this video lecture and examine how well you can actually understand and achieve all this learning outcome. In the previous lecture, some of the type of coding was explained. So now we will focus more on encoding. Encoding can be defined as the process of acquiring information and how it can transfer into the long-term memory. Because in your chapter regarding the short-term memory, we learned that our information that get from the external environment, which is the sensory information, it will only store in the sensory memory. After that, when we pay attention to this information, it will transfer to the short-term memory, but it will only last for 15 seconds. And after several ways of or several techniques that help us to practice and make this information can be transferred into long-term memory. So that process is actually what we call encoding. There are several types of ways that can help you to encode the information and transfer it to long-term memory. But over here, we will talk about the main or the most commonly explained, which is the maintenance rehearsal and elaborative rehearsal. So maintenance elaboration, it is more like you keep on repeat, but you are not going deeper, which means you are not going to understand the meaning or trying to make some connections for these new informations with other information. That is maintenance rehearsal. So it will actually result in little or no encoding. That's why sometimes if you keep on repeat a series of numbers, after several times you find that you can't record it anymore. Another way of encoding that is more useful and it helps to have a better performance in terms of memory is elaborative rehearsal. So this is a time that you are trying to go deeper, which you will consider the meaning and try to make connections, for example, with your own personal experience or with some other past knowledge that you learn, some prior knowledge that you have in the past. So it can make your informations to become more meaningful and easy to it is easier to recall. For examples that in the lecture of short-term memory, I introduce you a series of phone number. So if you just keep on record it like 01954144143, it will only stay as maintenance rehearsal. But if you try to relate it, or you have some chunking and you try to remember, okay, 019 is actually the year of this year, and then try to go for more like, okay, 4141 means what, it can help you to remember better. And in the future when you want to record it, it is easier, because when you remember the meaning, you can recall the phone number. So another process that you have is retrieval. So it is not the same as encoding. It is the process that happened after encoding. Your information has transferred into the long-term memory. So now is you want to transfer the information from long-term memory to working memory. So during this retrieval process, the memory will change from more permanent now become fragile again. So it is easier to change or modify. One of the theory that explain about how we process the information or how we encode the information, it will actually influence our memory performance. So there are three types of level of processing. The most basic one will be shallow processing, which means that you just remember at the physical structure. For example, if I show you a word, so you can recognize whether it is capital letter, it is small letter, whether it is in italic font or it is just normal font, whether it is boldface or non-boldface, whether it is in red color, in black color. So you can remember the physical structure, but you don't really know about how it sounds like, how you can pronounce it, and what is the meaning of it. But going deeper in the intermediate processing, it is more on the sound or the pronunciations of this word. But still, you might remember how it sounds like, but you can't really play around with this new information until the deepest processing. It is actually you pay a close attention to the new information, and you are trying to find out and focus on the meaning, and you try to connect this new information with something else. For example, during your first touch or your first exposed to psychology, I believe you learn about classical conditioning. So when you read on the slide, you see, okay, the first C for the classical is actually capital letter, and then another C, the conditioning, is also capital letter. After that, when it goes to intermediate processing, when your lecturer pronounce it, okay, it is classical conditioning. So you will remember the sound of this classical conditioning, but you don't really know about that meaning. But when it goes to the deep processing, it means that when your lecturer trying to tell you the experiment that conduct in the past about the dog, the saliva, and you try to relate it, okay, how this classical conditioning can happen in your life and how it enhance your learning. So during that time, when you can find your own personal example to explain it, that is the deep processing. And when you can achieve this deep processing in the future, when you are trying to retrieve it, try to recall this information, it is easier. The researchers Gordon and David, they are actually interested to find out whether if you use the visual imagery that you generate an image when you are trying to remember certain item, will it actually help to enhance your memory performance. So they use pair associate learning, which is they present a list of words which is in pair, and they want the participants to remember it, and after that they will have the recall test. So for they actually distribute, or they assign to the participant into two groups. Group A will silently repeat the pairs, which is they will remember the words boot, tree, house, train, pigeon, basketball, coffee, lighthouse. Whereas for group B, they require the participants to form a mental picture when they're trying to remember or trying to learn the list of words. So which means that whenever they go to boots, they need to form a image of boot. When they go to tree, they need to form a mental picture of tree. And after that, during the record test, they will only show one of the words, and the participant need to tell the another words that is pairing with these words. For example, they will show house, and the participants are required to remember the pair is train. So in at the end for this conclusion of this experiment, it found that those participants who are in group B can actually recall more words compared to group A. It means that when you're trying to form the mental picture, it can help you to enhance your memory. It can help you to remember more items compared to those people who just remember the words. One of the ways that can explain about how we encode the information, it will affect the memory performance on the task. For example, one of it is the self-reference effect, which is you're trying to relate a word or you're trying to relate one new information to yourself. So basically, when we learn words, we start from the physical characteristic. How is what is what are the alphabet that include in this word, and what is the spelling, how many alphabet, how many digits. After that, we learn about the pronunciation, the sound of this word. Then we go for meaning. So when it comes to meaning, it is actually deeper processing. But if you want to have a better memory performance on this word, you can actually refer it to yourself. So Eric and his team actually trying to demonstrate this self-reference effect. So they have the participants to learn a series of adjectives which it will appear for 3 seconds each. And for the self conditions, those participants are required to indicate whether the adjective describe themselves. So they need to choose yes or no. If yes means that it this word can refer to themselves and it describe them. If no means that these words cannot describe their own characteristic. Whereas another group is more on is the common conditions. So in these common conditions, the participants are required to indicate whether these words is something common or it is something very rare. So whether it is a unique word that seldom have any people to use or it is a very common. So same thing for these common conditions, the participants just need to indicate whether yes or no. So after that, they actually test on how well the participants can remember the words. So it found that those people that in self condition, which is they indicate whether it describes them well, they can remember more words compared to the common conditions. So another effect that explain about encoding and our memory is generations effect. So they have two groups of people. One is read group, another one is generate group. So how it happened is that they actually ask the participants to study a list which this words is in pair. So for those who are in the read group, they need to read the pairs of related words. For example, lamp and shade. Whereas for generate group, they need to fill in the blanks with a word that is related to the first word, and the experimental will provide the first two alphabet for the second word, which is the word they need to fill in the blank. And it found that those participants in the generate group, they can actually remember and recall more words compared to those people who just read. The storage of our mind is actually similar to your computer, which if you organize the information, you organize the document, when you want to retrieve it, it is actually easier. So in this kind of organizing informations, if let's say I ask you to remember a list of scientific terms, for example, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and then consolidations, nervous system, neural circle. So it is actually you were trying to remember it according to the category. For example, classical conditioning and operational conditioning should be under one category. So when you record it, these two will be next to each other. So that is actually one of the items that you can remember. It can help you to remember another information which is under the same category. That is what we call retrieval cue. So if let's say you are trying to remember some random thing, okay, you don't organize your informations, you don't have any consistent way to summarize each chapter, you just read through everything one by one, it actually will makes your memory performance drop compared to when you're trying to sum up all the information in one chapter using the mind map. Because when you use the mind map, it is actually helping you to categorize the information. And when you want to retrieve it, it will come out in the same pattern like your mind map. Okay, so organizing the information is actually very important to help us to record it or to retrieve it. So if let's say you are studying something that is more difficult, which you can't really understand based on the text itself, so you can actually use image or you can use some mental image that help you to figure it out how the whole passage mentions or describe about the scenario. It can help you to enhance how well you can remember the information. The techniques or the effect that we mentioned earlier, it is actually more focusing on how we study or how we use the elaborative learning. So we are trying to elaborate it and make it to process into deeper level and we can remember better. But how will it actually happen that when we retrieve or when we test ourselves with a questions or with quiz after we learn that new information, will it actually help us to enhance our memory on learning this knowledge? So Henry and Jefferson, they actually conduct this experiment. So they ask the participants to learn pairs words in pair. So they want the participants to recall back. For example, if I show the first word, the participant need to tell me or they need to recall the second word in this pair. So they group the participant into three groups. The first group is for the first study and test sessions, they need to study all the pairs and they need to test all the pairs. And after that, during the second trial or the second sessions, they need to study all pairs and test all pairs. But for group 2, the first trial is the same like group 1, but the only difference is when it comes to the repeat study and test session, which is the second trial, they don't need to study words that they already recall during the test session for the first trial. They just need to study whatever words they can't recall. And then after that, during the test session for trial 2, they need to recall back all the words. And for group 3, the first trial is the same like group 1 and 2, but for trial 2, they need to study all pairs, but for the test sessions, they only need to recall the pairs that they can't remember during the first trial, the test session for first trial. So what the experimental found is it actually have the similar memory performance for both group 1 and 2, but for group 3 they actually perform poorer compared to group 1 and 2. So what makes it different is that regardless whether we study it again or not, it may not influence the memory performance. But if let's say we don't test it, it will reduce the memory performance for it. So it actually shows that the testing effect can be very helpful in terms of increasing our memory performance rather than you just keep on read again and again. Since we have discussed about so many effects, so many different type of way that we can encode and how it help us to enhance our memory performance, so how we can actually use it or apply it in study. So the first strategy or first technique that student can use is elaborate. So when you are learning a new concept, try to give it meaning by relating it to some other concept that you learned in the past, or you can relate it to your own personal life. For example, how you can actually remember operant conditioning. So this operant conditioning, it could be because some people, like your parents, they promise that they will give you iPhone, the latest iPhone, if you can achieve what kind of result. So that is the operant conditioning. So when you have this kind of example, which is so close to your life, it can make you understand and remember it better compared to when you just read what is operant conditioning and what are the definitions, what are the experiments that define or describe about this operant conditioning. Another way is using generate and test. So when you study one chapter, you can actually use whatever questions that posted on the online resources, or it is included in your textbook. So you try to test which part of this chapter something that you are still confusing and you are not so understand about it. So when you identify that this concept is something that you perform weaker compared to other concept, so you can revisit the concept rather than keep on reading the same chapter again and again. So other than using the quiz that provided by the publisher, you can also create your own questions. And in the past, experimental found that if the participants create their own questions, they attempt that questions and know their own strength and weaknesses in particular topic, they can actually perform better compared to those people who just answer to the questions that posed by the publisher. The third type of ways or techniques for learning or studying is organized. So very simple way is after you read the whole chapter, you can try to create a framework. So this framework can be referred to the mind map that students use to apply in their study. So when you create a framework, it helps to organize your mind, organize your learning in a better way. The next type of strategy is take break. Some of the students they tend to cram everything within a short period. For example, tomorrow is your final exam. So today you want to complete chapter 1 until chapter 10 within one day. It may makes you feel that okay, you achieve a lot of things, you study a lot of things, you put in a lot of effort because you study 10 chapters within one day. Compared to your friends, they only study one chapter per day, you find that yourself is actually achieved higher. But after that, you can actually find that the performance for these two type of studying, those who study one chapter per day, they have break in between, they can perform better because this break, the rest, the sleep after learning is actually help to form your memory. So if you don't rest, you just study everything, the memory cannot, the informations cannot transfer into long-term memory, and that's why when you come to exam hall, you will go blank. So the fifth type of technique is avoid illusions of learning. Sometimes if you just keep on reading the same chapter for few times, you will find that you take a lesser or shorter durations in reading that chapter. It is because you roughly know what are the words that is coming soon. But is it means that we study better if we can reduce the duration of reading the text? So for those people who just keep on reading the same passage, it actually they don't really remember it. They only makes them feel that they learn a lot because they can use a shorter duration in reading that passage. The last type of technique is be an active note taker. With the advance of technology, more and more students, you might actually bring your tab, your laptop into class and you will type your notes over there. But be careful. It is good that you take note. But what kind of notes is good for your learning? If let's say you just type out everything that your lecturer deliver in class, that is actually not helpful. It is only writing the transcript for your lecturer. Whereas if you try to understand the lecture and write it in your own sentence, write it in your own way, that actually helps you to enhance your memory. For example, in the past, I do like to use some joke or some story that a lay person can understand in taking notes so that when I revisit this concept, I can learn it better and I will find that it is easier for me to absorb this knowledge. So try to think which type of techniques that we said here is actually useful for you. Choose one topic and use that technique. After 1 week, during week 11, Monday 2 p.m., you need to submit your reflective essay in 1 page regarding this effective study. So far, we have discussed the ways that we encode the information and how it can actually apply in helping us to be effectively learning. So now we are going to talk about retrieval. If we already encode and transfer this information into the long-term memory, it is already stored in our hard disk. But how can we retrieve it? How we can get this information out of the memory? So very simple example that you used to have in your daily life is sometimes you might actually forget where is your phone. So what is the best way for you to find and get this phone? So a very simple one, go back to the location that you went just now. For example, you went into your kitchen. So now you go back to that location and retrieve back the information because that is the place where you lost your phone. So you can try to recall back what happened just now, where did I walk just now, and what are the things that I touched before this, so that you can retrieve back that information and it helps you to find out your phone. So of course, some of these experimental, they do want to find out whether the retrieval cue is correct. So what they do is they ask the participants to learn about words, learn some of the words. So one of the group during the study phase, they need to write down the words with any three words that associate with this noun. So when you want to learn about, for example, durian, what do you remember? You may say that it is green color for the outer and then inside is yellow color and then you would describe it. So these three words that actually help you to link it so that when you retrieve the noun, it is easier. So another group of people, they need to remember this noun using the retrieval cue that generated by other people. The third group of people, they never see the noun, but they only provide, the experimenter provide the retrieval cue that generated by other people. So among these three groups, it found that the first group, the words they can recall back, they can remember is more than the another two groups. So we have go through the encoding, what are the techniques of encoding, as well as the techniques, the tips for effective studying, as well as retrieval. So now we are going to talk about what conditions it actually help us to study or to perform better. So cognitive psychologists propose that if, let's say, the conditions of encoding and retrieval are matching, that is the best moment that people can recall their long information in the long-term memory better. So the first type is encoding specificity. So they have two groups of students. One group, they during the study phase, they need to study with earphone, and in the earphone they will listen to all the noise that will happen in cafeteria. Another group of people, they will listen to the earphone as well, but in the earphone is silent. So after that, they will test these students in different conditions. So both the with noise and in quiet conditions for group A and B, they will break into four groups. So with noise, those people who hear the noise of cafeteria, half of them will go to a noisy conditions to take their test. Another half, they will go to a very quiet conditions to take their test. Same goes to group B, those who have the earphone and in the earphone is quiet. So it found that if, let's say, when you are studying, which means during the phase of encoding, you are with studying it during a very noisy conditions, and when you go for your test, it is also noisy condition, you can perform better compared to when you are study in a very noisy place. After that, you take test in a very quiet place. That could actually make the difference. So same goes to those group B who study in quiet conditions. So try to think which type of conditions for the test phase will be more suitable for them to retrieve the information. So it is the same like, for example, if, let's say, you learn the information in the classroom. So at the same time, when it comes to exam, you are in the same classroom as well. It actually helps you to enhance how well you can retrieve the information, because you can recall back what are the things that your lecturer tell you during that moment. It somehow like replay in your mind. The another type of matching condition is state-dependent learning. So it is associated with the internal state of you. For example, the emotions or your physiological arousal that you have during that moment, which means during encoding as well as retrieval process. So how the experimental actually study about this state-dependent learning. So they have two group of participants. One group of participants is listening to the music that can create the positive emotions. Another group of people, group B, they are listening to the songs that can create sad emotions. So after that, they will ask the participant to rate their emotional state during that moment. So until they both of the group they can achieve positive or negative emotions, then the experimenter will ask them to learn a list of words. So after that, after 2 days, they need to come back again and record it back. So what happened is, when the participants they are listening to the same type of music which create the same type of emotions, they can actually remember better compared to those people initially you are actually manipulate or you already have the sad emotions, but during the test phase you are in a happy emotion, you listen to all the happy song, Chinese New Year song, Christmas song, which create the positive emotions. It can actually help you to improve your memory performance, because during the encoding you are actually with the sad emotions. But be careful, if you want to do similar experiment, you must learn. For example, you already create the negative emotions. How you can actually stabilize or you neutral back the emotions? That is the ethical issues that may involve in this type of experiment. The third type of matching condition is transfer appropriate processing. For example, when encoding, I just ask you to remember the pronunciation of this word, the new vocabs that you are exposed to or you are introduced to. So during the retrieval, during the test phase, I ask you to recall back the pronunciation, the sound of this word. This kind of matching, it can actually help to enhance your memory performance. But if let's say during the encoding moment, I ask you to remember how to relate it to other people, to other information. During the test phase, I ask you, what is the physical characteristic of this word? What is the sound of this word? It found that even though during the encoding, you are going for higher level, but when it comes to the test, your performance is still lower than those people that have matching conditions. Now we come to the third part of today's lecture. It is consolidations. So it can be defined as the process that transforms your new memories from a very fragile state in which it can be disrupted easily, can be modified easily, to a more permanent state which is more resistant to disruptions. So how it can actually happen? How could it happen in our mind? The second task of today's lecture is explain what is synaptic consolidation, provide elaboration for it, what is systems consolidations, and how these consolidations can relate to sleep. So the same thing, I will have the assignment submissions under week 11. The due date will be Monday of week 11. So it is the same as your task 1. Just now, when we talk about consolidation, it is the process where you transfer the new information which is at the fragile stage into a permanent state which is resistant to disruption. So now reconsolidation, it means that when you retrieve the memory from long-term memory which is at the permanent state, you put it into working memory which go back to fragile state. So at the working memory at this fragile state, this memory, this information can be modified, can be disrupted easily. So after you use the memory, you use the information, you need to consolidate it again, which is put it back to the permanent state. For example, every day you go to certain place using this highway A, but one day suddenly this way is already stopped. So the government already tell you, okay, we are not going to continue this highway, so you need to find another new way to go to that destination. So after you learn the new way, it will actually modify your memory. So after you learn this new way for several times, it will change this new route into the permanent state, which it lasts in the long-term memory. So the experimentals trying to understand this concept or this phenomena using rats to study what would be the outcome. So they assign the rats into 3 conditions. The first condition is they will inject the anisomycin before the consolidation happen. So this anisomycin is actually a type of antibiotic which it will inhibit the protein synthesis, which means that it will actually interrupt the changes at the synapse that responsible for forming new information. So after they inject this protein, this antibiotic before the consolidations, it found that at during day 3, the rat seems like do not have any fear towards the tone. It means that they never form the memory of learning about the conditioning. Whereas for the second condition, they inject the antibiotic after the consolidation. So the rats learn about the conditioning of tone and shock. So now the rats already know once you hear the tone, you will have fear because the shock is coming soon. So they inject it on the second day, which is after the consolidation, after the memory form. So day 3, they try again. They play the tone and see whether the rats will freeze or will not respond at all. So in this second condition, which inject after the consolidation happen, the rats freeze in response to the tone. it means that their learning is still there. Whereas for the third conditions, which is they will introduce the pairing, the conditioning of tone and shock for the first day. During the second day, they play the tone again. So it seems like retrieve the information from your long-term memory to your working memory. This time, when the rat responds to the tone, it frees, so the experimenter will inject the antibiotic. So it is again, it interrupt the new consolidations to happen. So on day 3, they try again, they play the tone. This round, the rat does not freeze. So it means that they already interrupt the second round of consolidation. So the memory already disrupt. So it found that yes, this process, the process that we mentioned in the previous slide, is proven. So I hope you learn a little bit more about this topic for the long-term memory, and be reminded to complete the 2 tasks that assigned in this video. Thank you for your time.